With every email sent, another marriage unraveled. The thought of the chaos Samuel was creating brought a satisfied grin to his face. At that moment, George Terry's face turned even redder, and he burst out in a flood of swear words. For the last 30 minutes, Samuel had been watching his beautiful wife move gracefully across the ballroom, keeping a careful distance as midnight approached. She was surrounded by a group of rich, smug colleagues from his work, including her obnoxious boss, a man born into wealth. She was the center of attention, and they showered her with compliments, treating her like a rare treasure. Their flattery was thick with insincerity. This wasn't anything new. For the past 2 years, Samuel had watched this play out during the company's New Year's celebrations. At first, he thought it was just her drinking too much champagne, so he put up with it the first year. But last year, the loud, over-the-top display became too much to ignore, and it pushed him to take action. Now, as he stood there watching, he felt a gentle tug on his coat. Turning around, he saw Dora, Jessica's closest friend and work confidant, standing in front of him. "Happy New Year, Samuel," she said, offering her cheek for a quick kiss. His lips barely touched her cheek before he stepped back and met her warm brown eyes. Dora seemed like a socialite born into wealth and privilege. She always had a calm, confident expression, often with a hint of smugness, as if her aristocratic background gave her some kind of silent wisdom. But tonight, something about her was different. A look of concern, even pity, appeared in Dora's eyes. "Samuel, don't worry," she said softly. "It's just a tradition, a harmless exchange of New Year's kisses." Dora tried to reassure him, telling him that Jessica would be back by his side soon, unharmed, and ready to show him her love once again. But Samuel wasn't convinced. Sensing his doubt, Dora continued, trying to explain that despite Jessica's lively and spontaneous nature, her feelings for him were sincere. "You two are so different," she said. "You're more quiet and reflective, while Jessica is energetic and social. But the more she interacts with people who match her energy, the more she ends up loving you." Samuel responded slowly, his words thoughtful. "Okay, Dora, but let me ask you this. Did she spend the whole Christmas party under the mistletoe with her colleagues? She danced all night and got close with the company leaders, yet here, at my company's New Year's ball, she's doing the same thing, dancing, exchanging kisses, but keeping her distance from my colleagues." His voice turned sharp, tinged with sarcasm. "Interesting, isn't it? By kissing everyone here but me, she seems to be questioning my worth. Is this some new tradition? Or is it her way of showing affection, knowing how I feel about George and then kissing him a dozen times to make sure I see?" Dora hesitated, her confidence faltering. She lowered her eyes, clearly disturbed, but still tried to defend her friend. "Samuel, I get that you're upset, but you have to understand." He cut her off. "I think I do understand," he said firmly. "After 5 years of marriage, I've finally started to get it." For the first time that night, Samuel turned his back on her. He walked over to their table, retrieved a briefcase he'd discreetly placed there, and carefully unbuttoned it. Inside, he found a beautifully wrapped gift. Without a second thought, he removed the ring from his finger and placed it under the decorative bow. Turning back to Dora, he handed her the gift. "I'm leaving," he said calmly. "When Jessica finally frees herself from those men, give this to her. Tell her I wish her a truly happy New Year, and may she enjoy all the blessings she's so richly earned." As he moved to walk away, Dora grabbed his hand, her voice shaking with urgency. "Samuel, please don't go. Don't leave, Samuel. I'll bring her to you. She's had too much champagne again. You should take her home," she pleaded. Samuel shook his head, his voice steady. "No, Dora, I don't need to do that. She has a room in this hotel. While I was busy with work, she had plenty of time to catch the attention of many men. I think you know this, considering you've been around her. She has her car, her clothes, and everything else she could need. I'm sure one of the men she's entertaining will be more than happy to look after her. Maybe they'll handle everything, or maybe they won't. But don't look at me like that. You fooled me once last year. I gave her an entire year to make up her mind. Well, she's made hers, and I've made mine. Goodbye, Dora." He paused for a moment, then added, Honestly, it'll be a relief if I never see you again." With that, Samuel walked out of the grand ballroom. He nodded briefly at Nicole, the HR director, who had been his confidant earlier in the day. While his boss and his group busied themselves with hotel arrangements, Nicole had stayed by his side, helping with the event. Samuel wasn't blind to the truth about his boss. The man had booked a luxurious hotel suite, charging it to the company, where he had carried on an affair with Jessica. Samuel had proof, photographs and videos that left no doubt. Nicole, too, had her own collection of incriminating evidence, which was soon to reach the chairman of the board. After leaving the ballroom, Nicole and her husband made their way toward the group of men surrounding Jessica. Meanwhile, Dora worked her way through the crowd, dealing with the eager admirers trying to steal kisses. Nicole, too, drew some attention, but any flirtatious advances were quickly shut down by her husband, a former American football player with a tough, no-nonsense attitude. As Nicole made her way through the crowd, she saw Dora intercept George Terry, the company's CEO, and his companion. Dora stopped her husband just a few steps away, and Nicole watched the scene unfold. At the sharp sound of Dora calling Jessica's name, Jessica pulled away from George's embrace in surprise. Nicole's smile grew at the sight of Jessica's startled expression, but her face hardened as she saw Dora hand Jessica the wrapped gift. Dora spoke calmly but firmly, "Samuel left this for you. He's gone. He watched you flirt and get too familiar all night. When you started kissing several men, he gave this to me and left." Jessica's face lit up with a dismissive smile. "Oh, you know how Samuel is," she said casually. "Sometimes he throws a little tantrum if I don't pay attention to him for a few minutes. I'll go home and apologize. I'm not sure what to do with this, though. He loves me. Even when he's upset, he still gives me gifts. Let's see what it is." "Joe, I don't think this is a gift," Dora said gently, but Jessica was already tearing into the wrapping paper. As she hurried to open it, the ring slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. She froze, her face twisted in confusion as she looked at the ring and asked, "What is this?" Dora bent down, picked up the ring, and handed it back to her with a small, knowing smile. "Isn't that your husband's wedding ring?" Jessica stared at the ring in disbelief, still holding the paper tightly in her hands. Her face clouded with confusion as she turned to Dora, who quietly said, "I tried to warn you, Joe." Determined to find out what else was inside, Jessica continued unwrapping the package. Inside, Jessica found a spotless white box. A flicker of relief washed over her, and she allowed herself a small smile, thinking maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. She gently shook the box, noticing its weight before cautiously peeling off the tape sealing its edges. When the last piece came away, the contents spilled out onto the floor. Glossy sheets and photographs scattered in all directions, some landing face up. Startled, Jessica dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up the fallen items. Several bystanders instinctively bent down to help gather the scattered photos. An eerie silence spread across the room as those who glimpsed the pictures froze. Jessica's eyes widened with horror as the realization hit her. A sharp, piercing scream erupted from her throat, breaking the silence and drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The murmurs of the growing crowd intensified as people saw the explicit images. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the ballroom. Dora's face contorted in shock, her eyes widening in horror. Nearby, George's face went ghostly pale as he stood frozen, unable to look away. Trembling, he bent down and picked up one of the larger photographs, a vivid, full-color 20 by 30 centimeter image. He clutched it tightly to his chest, as if desperate to shield it from others' gaze. "What the hell, Joe?" he shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. By now, the entire ballroom was focused on the unfolding scene. The photos told a clear and damning story, revealing Jessica trying different approaches with people who were clearly not her husband. The images were explicit, showing Jessica, George, and several executives from Samuel's company, all in compromising situations. The sheer number and variety of the photos left no doubt. The scenes were brazen, involving both men and women, with little regard for who was involved or where it happened. The weight of the revelations was too much for Jessica to handle. Overcome, she fainted, collapsing to the floor. George's foot accidentally stopped her head from hitting the hard tile, sparing her from a serious injury. Dora rushed to Jessica's side, lifting her head and gently stroking her cheek. "Jessica, are you okay? Talk to me, Jessica," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic as she tried to wake her friend. Meanwhile, the onlookers started picking up the scattered photos, looking at them one by one. A heavy, tense silence settled over the group as they processed the shocking evidence. Then, breaking the quiet, a woman turned to her husband, who was staring at one of the photos. "You're a disgrace," she hissed, her voice full of fury. Without waiting for his response, she swung her purse at him. He stumbled back. Before he could recover, she kicked him hard in the same spot, sending him crashing to the floor in agony. Seizing the moment, the woman knelt down and began carefully sorting through the scattered photos. After a brief pause, she raised her head and addressed the shocked crowd. "Ladies," she began, her voice commanding and sharp. "For those of us married to the esteemed management of Mr. Terry and Son, you might want to take a closer look at these pictures." Her words carried a hint of cunning. "They feature not just your husbands, but others too," she added, with a barely disguised threat. "If you want to save on divorce lawyer fees, contact me. Maybe we can negotiate a group rate." At once, 9 more women dropped to their knees, picking up the photos with growing fury as they realized the full scope of the betrayal. The men, sensing the increasing anger, began backing away, their faces filled with dread. Amid the chaos, someone noticed a few flash drives among the scattered evidence, speculating about the potentially incriminating content they held. An elderly man, impeccably dressed, turned furiously to his partner. "Don't forget the marriage contract. This is insidious fraud," he shouted, his face red with rage. His blonde partner, unshaken, shot back venomously. "Liar," she spat. "That contract means nothing, and you know it." With a sneer, she added, "I suppose this meeting meant nothing either," before shoving 2 compromising photos in his face and storming off. As she waved the photos in the air, her curses echoed across the ballroom. The man, stunned and panicked, stepped back and bolted from the room. Nearby, another woman sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her chest with one hand and a photo with the other. Her husband sat beside her, his face buried in his hands as he wept. On the other side of the room, a different man, trembling with emotion, held up one of the photos to the striking woman standing before him. "So, you're attracted to both genders?" he demanded, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. "What's going on here? You've told me over and over that you weren't interested in women, that the 3 of us would never happen." The woman's face turned bright red with embarrassment, and she quickly fled the scene, her high heels clicking awkwardly as she stumbled away. Elsewhere, another woman grabbed several photos and began calling out names as she marched to the center of the room. One of the women she confronted froze, her face a mix of shock and dread. The newcomer glared at one of the photos, her face twisted with fury. She turned on her husband, who immediately began to back away. "You've got some explaining to do," she yelled, waving the incriminating photo in his face. He stammered, trying to retreat, but she pursued him relentlessly, shouting and gesturing wildly. This dramatic confrontation played out over and over across the ballroom. In every corner, furious wives lashed out at their husbands with slaps, kicks, and blows from handbags. Ears were boxed, eyes blackened, and tempers flared as chaos filled the hall. Meanwhile, Jessica, now conscious, sat motionless, her face blank as she watched the pandemonium unfold around her. A well-dressed man in a sharp tuxedo approached and knelt beside her, his face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Jessica turned to him, confusion clear in her expression. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice faint. "I am Adam Becker," he replied gravely, "but I'm afraid no one can help you now. I am a court bailiff, and my duty is to enforce the court's orders." Before she could say anything else, he handed her a stack of papers. "Jessica Lord, you have officially been served with a court order." The crowd fell into stunned silence as he handed her the divorce papers, their presence casting an even darker shadow over the already shocking evening. Ladies and gentlemen, he continued, addressing the crowd, if you haven't had the chance to see the photos yet, you may instead examine the divorce documents, now available online as public records. They include a detailed list of individuals Jessica shared personal moments with over the past year, along with the exact times and locations of these encounters. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. For a nominal fee, I can also provide a link to Jessica's personal website, where a full report of her actions since January 1st of last year is available. This might help you figure out whether your own spouse is involved. For those who've participated in group activities, 3, 4, or more, you may contact me for additional documentation. Digital copies of the evidence are available for an extra fee, which could be quite useful in court. With that, he bowed deeply and left the room, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with tears, fear, and chaos. He knew the consequences this spectacle would cause, but he considered the financial gains worth the risk. Jessica sat still, clutching the divorce papers in her lap. Doris stayed close, wrapping an arm around her as Jessica's lips trembled in disbelief. She scanned the faces around her, reading a mixture of hostility, pity, anger, and concern. Throughout her life of privilege, Jessica had faced both envy and admiration, but now she saw neither. The weight of shame and loss was too much to bear. She buried her face in Dora's chest and broke into uncontrollable sobs. Meanwhile, George Terry, the CEO, tried to regain control of the situation. I want every one of these damn photos collected and destroyed immediately, he barked at his subordinates. Turning to Nicole, he added, by Monday, I expect a formal letter of reprimand from Samuel Lord on my desk, followed by his termination documents. Nicole stayed calm. Mr. Terry, she said evenly, I regret to inform you that Mr. Lord submitted his resignation earlier today. He gave 2 weeks' notice, used the vacation time you approved last week, packed up his things, and left. She paused before continuing, keeping her tone even. However, I understand your directive, and I will process his dismissal immediately. Rest assured, Mr. Lord will have no further opportunities within this organization. Terry's face darkened with fury, but Nicole remained composed. There is one more thing, Mr. Terry, she added. Before he left, Mr. Lord met with the chairman of the board. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The chairman, Terry's father, had already accepted Samuel Lord's resignation. As if that weren't enough, Samuel had secured a new position with a company he had previously advised, contingent only on Mr. Terry's written consent. Terry's face turned a deep, angry crimson, causing those around him to recoil from his growing rage. He erupted into a tirade, cursing both his father and Samuel Lord. Nicole and her husband watched his humiliation with quiet satisfaction, their hands subtly clasped as they kept their expressions neutral. Meanwhile, Samuel Lord was already on his way from New York to Austin, Texas, driving his newly purchased Chevy High Country Suburban. This sturdy four-wheel drive SUV, powered by a powerful 6L turbo diesel engine, had been custom-ordered by Samuel in the autumn as soon as the latest models became available. It had just been delivered the day before, marking the start of a new chapter in his life. According to his navigation system, the drive to Austin, his soon-to-be home, would take exactly 24 hours and 32 minutes along the carefully planned route. Samuel had put a lot of thought into this trip, seeing it as an opportunity to reconnect with his rural American roots. Having grown up in Idaho as a country boy, he planned to enjoy the charm of every state he passed through. As he reached Virginia, he purposely left the main highways and chose instead to follow the winding, scenic country roads made famous in John Denver's songs. His journey included stops in the quaint Carolina towns he'd long admired in Mary Chapin Carpenter's lyrics. He relished the idea of sampling homemade jams and jellies from roadside stands and dining at local diners where the townspeople gathered. Samuel was determined to escape the traffic and chaos of city life, which had become unbearable for him. Before purchasing the SUV, Samuel had also made the decision to separate his finances from Jessica's. Despite her much higher earnings during their marriage, Samuel took quiet pride in knowing that some of her money had gone into buying his $88,000 vehicle. Although the car didn't erase their financial differences, it symbolized a personal victory for him. As part of their divorce settlement, They had agreed to keep their investments and pension funds separate. Samuel had even made a generous offer. If Jessica signed the divorce papers within 10 days, she would get the penthouse, and he would relinquish any claim to her trust fund. As he drove along the open road, Samuel flipped through radio stations, briefly stopping on a station playing traditional country music. It was a genre Jessica had always despised and openly mocked. Laughing at the memory of her disdain, Samuel switched to classic vinyl, enjoying the feeling of independence. The chaos of the previous New Year's ball had been a turning point for Samuel. Since then, he had focused on regaining control of his life. Though doubts occasionally crept in, he had remained steadfast and worked on a solid plan for his future. He couldn't help but think that Mr. Terry and Son, the company he was leaving behind, was bound to fail under George Terry's leadership. Without Samuel's design innovations and patents, responsible for over half of the company's sales and profits, the company's collapse seemed inevitable within a year or two. The thought brought a smile to his face. Samuel had already laid the groundwork for his own company, filled with cutting-edge designs and a clear vision for success. He looked forward to watching his new venture surpass Mr. Terry and Son, crushing the old company like a bug on a windshield. While William Terry, the chairman of the board and George's father, might sell the company before it went under, Samuel took comfort in knowing that George's incompetence and Samuel's own contributions would soon be obvious to everyone. Reflecting on the events of the previous night, Samuel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had successfully exposed both George and Jessica as morally bankrupt in front of their social circle. Next year, he planned to further discredit George by leading his new company to dominate the industry. Nicole had already called him, practically bursting with excitement, to marvel at how perfectly everything had played out. Jessica herself, accidentally scattering the incriminating photos across the ballroom, had been an unexpected yet spectacular twist. While Samuel had designed the gift box to ensure the photos spilled out when opened, the dramatic chaos that followed was even more than he'd hoped for. Jessica's parents had always looked down on Samuel, appalled that their perfect daughter had married someone they considered beneath her. To them, his engineering degree from the Colorado School of Mines and his master's from the University of Michigan were meaningless, insignificant compared to Jessica's prestigious liberal arts degree from Brown University. Now, as Samuel drove through the countryside, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of her parents hearing about the disaster at the ball. Their judgmental silence would speak volumes. The fresh country air filled his lungs, a symbol of the new chapter ahead, one free from Jessica's stifling grip and the toxic atmosphere of his former workplace. Samuel's grin stretched wider as he reveled in how skillfully he had orchestrated the chaos of the evening. Jessica's carefully constructed image had crumbled, exposing her true nature for everyone to see. Miles away, on a peaceful country road, Samuel turned up the radio. The endless stretch of the open road lay before him, and for the first time in years, he felt truly free. A smirk played at the corners of his lips as he reflected on the chaos he had left behind and the promising future awaiting him on the horizon. Meanwhile, Dora and her husband, Albert, were accompanying Jessica back to her home. As soon as Jessica stepped inside and saw the emptiness of the space, she broke into tears once more. On the drive back, she had tried to brace herself for the inevitable conversation with Samuel, searching for ways to justify her actions. Deep down, however, she knew her excuses were weak and self-serving. In her heart, she understood the truth. She had betrayed her marriage. She had convinced herself that her extramarital affairs were harmless, a way to improve her life and their relationship. She even rationalized that these encounters helped her cope with her desires and brought new techniques to enrich their romantic moment. But as she clung to these justifications, she realized their absurdity. Samuel would see right through her lies. He had always taken their marriage vows seriously, and the mere thought of swapping partners or introducing other games had infuriated him. Why had she ever expected him to accept the deceitful story she had created? Deep within her, Jessica knew that the spark in their marriage had long since faded. But when she stepped into their apartment and saw that Samuel's belongings were gone, the weight of her actions hit her with devastating clarity. She had created the abyss into which she now found herself falling. Collapsing onto the floor, Jessica sobbed uncontrollably, cursing her own arrogance. For years, she had convinced herself she could manipulate her innocent, trusting husband into forgiving her, no matter the offense. This strategy had worked for 3 years, until tonight, when her marriage and reputation had been completely destroyed. Meanwhile, Samuel's time seemed to fly by as he pressed forward with his plans. Before tossing his old SIM card into the dirty city snow, he made sure to clone it, ensuring he could stay in touch during his transition to Texas the following week. He meticulously sent out personalized emails, each containing carefully curated attachments. With every email sent, another marriage unraveled. The thought of the chaos he was creating brought a satisfied grin to his face. Just the day before, he had sent an email to Albert, Dora's husband, and Samuel couldn't help but smirk, imagining Albert's reaction. While Jessica had made her choices, Samuel knew Dora's influence had played a major role in them. Her candid discussions about her own promiscuity, along with encouragement from their mutual friends to indulge in similar behavior, had only fueled Jessica's spiral down this path. On the 4th day, Dora and Jessica sat together on the couch in their New York apartment when the storm hit. Arthur had thrown Dora out of their home after receiving a damning email. The email contained a video compilation of 5 explicit scenes from Dora's private life. To make matters worse, the video also featured a recorded conversation between Dora and Jessica. In it, they shamelessly discussed their affairs, named their lovers, and mocked their husband's ignorance. Furious, Arthur forwarded copies of the conversation to the wives of every man mentioned in the video, knowing most of them personally, if not all. The fallout was swift and devastating. As Arthur watched the chaos unfold, he couldn't help but smirk at the destruction he had sparked. But George Terry found himself in an even worse situation. His father not only fired him, but also disowned him completely. William Terry, the chairman of the board, dismissed all the top managers involved in the scandal for tarnishing the company's reputation. Taking charge as acting CEO, William immediately worked to stabilize the business. Meanwhile, Nicole, now promoted to Vice President of Talent Development and Recruitment, took charge of rebuilding the leadership team, diligently scouting exceptional executives from around the world to restore the company's integrity. As Samuel neared the end of his journey to Texas, he passed the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard exit and continued toward Cesar Chavez Street. On his right, he spotted the Austin Convention Center, and to his left, Lady Bird Lake sparkled under the afternoon sun. Crossing Congress Avenue, he finally arrived at his destination, a luxurious high-rise apartment complex at 70 Rainey Street. His new company had fully covered the rent for the next 6 months, giving him ample time to find the perfect home. Samuel envisioned a place surrounded by lush trees and a sprawling lawn, just as he had always dreamed. Once settled, he planned to adopt a loyal canine companion to share his fresh start. He was also open to meeting a reliable, compatible partner to help him build a new home and family. His colleagues had already arranged a social event to introduce him to several recently divorced women. Finally free from the toxicity of his previous life, Samuel felt a cautious optimism about the future. Meanwhile, back in New York, the chaos showed no sign of slowing down. Infidelities led to accusations, and personal grievances spilled over into very public confrontations. Betrayed partners retaliated, and attackers exposed damaging evidence about their abusers. Nicole kept Samuel updated on every new development. As Samuel absorbed the details of the ongoing drama in New York, he felt immense satisfaction at how smoothly everything had unfolded. The metaphorical fire he had started burned ever brighter, bringing him a sense of accomplishment. Smiling, he reflected on how completely his life had turned around as he embraced his promising new future in Texas. From exposing harsh truths to building a fresh start, Samuel proved that sometimes our biggest setbacks can pave the way for our greatest comebacks.